welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 7 preview in association with QuinnBet. We have 13 games to get through on our live show tonight. Good evening to all of you tuning in and watching us on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on IrishNFLShow.com. And welcome to all of you listening back to the podcast. You can check out our Thursday Night Football preview podcast with Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Gazette, where we look ahead to the Steelers' trip to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals in a couple of hours' time as of this recording, where we are live. Trey Hendrickson looks like he's out for that one, incidentally. So more woe for the Bengals, who'll be hoping to stop the slide against the Steelers. Two teams on a bye this weekend. Speaking of teams on a slide, the Bills and the Ravens both with lots to think about as they slump ahead of their week off, and will hope to put it right when they come back. We kick off the action at Wembley Sunday, 2:30. Kieran, Craig and Ben will be in attendance. Kieran Boyle and Brian O'Leary with me, Conor Brophy, this evening, previewing the Week 7 games. We start with Rams, Jags. I'll kick off on this one. Jags, we were saying last week, perhaps living slightly unsustainably on defense. They had the NFL's top-rated secondary, but a lot of that was down to, if you might call it, excessive turnover production. They'd averaged over 3 takeaways per game over the first 5 weeks of the season. Didn't manage to get a single one against the Seahawks and came down to earth. The Hawks grounding the Jags and coming away from Duval with a win in that one. They welcomed the Rams to town. Rams arriving with 2.5 points of favoritism per QuinnBet. The Rams, of course, without Puka Nacua, which makes a big difference in terms of what they're going to be able to do this weekend. They will be leaning more heavily on Davante Adams, obviously, in the passing game. They'll look to get some better production out of Kyren Williams than they managed at the weekend. He was largely kept quiet in their last game and, of course, coughed up a fumble against the San Francisco 49ers, which turned out to be crucial in deciding the outcome of that game. I do think that the Rams are good value for this one on the road. Been impressed with what the Jags have achieved so far this season. Not so much with what the O-line managed last weekend. 7 sacks and 17 hits Trevor Lawrence took. That's not what you want to be doing rolling into town against this front four. Poona Ford, Byron Young, Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk, and those guys just be pinning their ears back looking to get after Lawrence if his O-line can't do something better than it managed last week. Kieran Boyle, you've said in the past that as Travis Etienne goes, so go the Jags on offense. Etienne was held to under 4 yards a carry last weekend, and the Jags could get nothing going.
Yeah, exactly. You saw what happened. And it's, on top of Etienne having a difficult afternoon, you mentioned earlier about Lawrence having a rough go of it. It's almost like the Jags, I've said it to people, when we discussed the end of the game against the Chiefs, the Monday Night Football, primetime wins, they're almost worth 2 victories. They're almost worth 2 in the W column, because you get all the eyes of the world watching you. And, it's almost like the Jags, there's a phrase here, they start smelling yourself and start to believe the press. And, it was one of those classic letdown games. They just never got going. That the O-line, which has been a pillar of strength for the Jags so far, it wasn't able to keep Trevor upright. And Lawrence has been, we've discussed it all season. He's been erratic with the ball. But, as I said, with Etienne, he was basically locked down. He had 55 total yards. And, he's going up against, like you said earlier, he's going up against Braden Fisk and Poona Ford, and just a wrecking ball at the front four for the Rams. So it's disappointing in the Jags. There's been a lot of talk on the local radio about, are they peaking too soon? Have they they only had 4 wins in the whole of last year, and they've got 4 wins so far. Did they peak, or are they peaking too soon? And it's we talk all the time about the NFL being a week-on-week league, and I think they just have to kind of regroup. And you saw the footage from Cohen in the locker room afterwards, where they're just trying to, refocus everything. It was a good long chat with everybody, get focused again. The Monday night game, there was a huge high, but now we've got to get back to the grind of the NFL. And they're coming up against a huge team in the Rams. It's an international game, so we'll see if that's any kind of leveler. Is a big time difference for the Rams. But, you got that Rams front four coming at Lawrence. We know Puka is out, but, they still have that. So I don't really see any way that the Rams are going to be upset in London. I think that the Jags are just still high on the Jags, still think they'll have a good season, but I think this is going to be too tough of a challenge, even without a Rams with Puka Nacua. I just think the Rams have too much. They'll use Davante Adams, but they'll rely a lot on the running game. And I think when you put Williams up against Etienne, I think Williams is going to come out on top with a greater yardage, and pretty close game. But I think the Rams are going to come out on top.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty close one, Brian, at least according to the bookies, where the Rams favored by effectively a field goal. The London factor can prove to upend favouritism, though, and we've seen some surprise results in international games in the past. Is this one of the ones where that happens, or do you see the Rams taking care of this one?
No, I'll go with the Jags in this one. A couple of factors. One, the London piece. They're well used to coming to London. They embrace the opportunity to come and play at Wembley. The Rams are travelling very late. I think this is the first time. There's been so many different models. Come early in the week, come Friday. This instance, I think they're arriving Saturday. I think this is the latest we've ever seen a team come in. I don't know if that's going to bode well for them on Sunday. And a Rams team that, as good as they are, we spoke on Monday about the inconsistency of the offense over the course of the season. Took them a long while to get going last week. Things haven't been right offensively. Their star player, you could argue, is out. No, I'm going to go with the Jags. I think the Jags find a way to win on Sunday.
All right, the 6 o'clock slate starts off with the team that beat the Jags rather, in London last year. The Bears, that was the last game the Bears won until the final week of the season. So they kind of peaked way too early in the season. Speaking of teams that are peaking early, the Bears host the Saints at Soldier Field. Bears coming off morale-boosting primetime win. As Kieran was saying, primetime wins sometimes feel like 2 wins. You get that real feel-good factor, and now you welcome one of the teams with one of the worst records in the league, the New Orleans Saints. Bears favoured by 4.5 points at home. Will it go according to script, O'Brien?
I believe it will. Connor, you touched on even a separate conversation we had during the week around last season and this time of the year, the similarities around you were looking ahead to games and you're thinking, right, we get this one over the line. We're 4-2, and it all kind of went wayward, shall we say, after the Washington game. But I don't see it this way this year. I think this what we're seeing now over the course of the last couple of weeks, and you touched on it during the week as well. The Bears are establishing themselves under a new head coach. Ben Johnson went away after a sloppy performance into bye week. He seems to be getting things right and even keel offensively. The offensive line seems to improve. Kelly Williams had a lot more time in his hands Monday. He also looks like a quarterback that's kind of finally gradually getting into his mojo in terms of what's expected of him. So it's a stellar performance on Monday. Whatever way you want to, crack this game down, like the fact that they've right the wrongs of last year, games they lost last year, close games, but obviously the enormity of going back into Washington trying to right the wrongs of what happened in that particular game last season, where the whole season unfolded after that. And I think they're fortunate as well in the roundabout way. Schedule can do nice things for you at times. They're coming off 2 big wins, one on the road in Vegas. They've obviously come off a big road victory on Monday. They're back home. They're back home against a team, the Saints, that right now just can't seem to stop anybody defensively going up and down the field. And I see it that way on Sunday. I think the line is quite low, to be honest. Connor, 4.5. That's for me is one of the safe bets of the weekend. I'm very keen on seeing how the Bears get on at the weekend. It will be a typical Bears game, Connor, where they don't do what we expect. But in this instance, I think they're good for a very good win on Sunday. I'm expecting a big performance.
A typical Bears game is a letdown loss. And I was looking at the NFL Network preview of this one earlier, and it's the first time in a long time that I've seen every single NFL Network analyst predict a Bears win, which made me very nervous. I'm used to seeing ghosts when it comes to the Bears. As I said, this time last year, they came off that morale-boosting win in London. They come and play the Commanders in the famous Hail Mary game where Tyreek Stevenson decided it'd be better to talk to fans and to actually defend his man, and we all know what happened there. And the Bears just lost 10 games in a row. They had Arizona and the Patriots. The schedule looked like it was lining up really nicely for them, and it all went to hell. This year, as you say, Brian, you'd argue that the Bears might have flipped the script, that they come in and they put the demons to bed, and that one they come out of. And one thing I've been really impressed by two things I've been impressed by with the Bears. Firstly, they've shown progress, and Ben Johnson has shown ability in particular to fix things as he goes along. Comes out of the bye, it's the best rushing performance of the season by the Bears. For the first time, they really get DeAndre Swift going. He picks up 108 yards, 8 yards a clip, just under 8 yards a clip, and 60 yards in the passing game as well, which opens up so much of what he wants to do. So much of what Ben Johnson achieved as offensive coordinator at the Lions, which made his name, was about what they were able to do in the running game, where initially, of course, he started with DeAndre Swift before he was shipped out, and they brought in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, the Sonic and Knuckles duo. It was great to see that. But the other thing is, if you look at the Bears, who didn't play particularly well against the Raiders, who had their problems against the Commanders as well, they've been able to get punched in the nose and still find a way to recover. They had a blocked field goal against the Commanders. They had some things that went wrong. And they also had to cope, by the way, with some fairly erratic play from Caleb Williams, who has at times looked like he's on the right track, but also, and PFF flashed up this stats, which confirms what every Bears fan has seen with their own eyes over the last 2 seasons. He has more off-target throws than any other quarterback in the NFL. That's the only statistical category in which he's a leader in the NFL, and probably one that you would certainly not want him to be leading in. Bears have struggled to stop the run defensively. That's not going to be particularly helpful against the Saints, who, while they haven't been able to score at all, and they're averaging under 20 points a game, which is a huge concern for them, the Saints have actually defended reasonably well. They have one of the better secondaries in the league, and have been surprisingly feisty at times. Obviously, they caused the Bills a lot of problems. They were pretty competitive in some of their other games as well. Despite that 1-5 record, I think the Saints are a team that can cause the Bears problem, and probably will cause the Bears problems if the Bears don't get a grip on some of their own defensive issues. That said, I would be very surprised if the Bears can't back up what they did last week. We'll talk about the Patriots shortly, and I was saying, when you break serve, when you get one of these primetime wins, you got to then take advantage of when the schedule offers you an opportunity. You got to stack wins. The Bears have 3 in a row now, 3-piece, looking to make it 4, and I think they will do. Kieran.
Well, I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm predicting a shock Saints victory. I think Rattler has been quietly consistent the last couple of weeks with Shaheed and with Kamara on the ground. I'm going to go with the upset.
All right, we move on to Patriots-Titans. Patriots, one of the biggest favourites at the weekend. They're 7-point favourites on the road in Tennessee. I look at this Patriots team, Kieran, and I can't help think of the Muppets movie with Jason Segel and Amy Adams and that great opening musical number. I've got everything that I need, and it's right in front of me. The Patriots, they're rolling. They got those 2 back-to-back wins. They're watching the Bills slump and fall apart around them. They're sitting atop of the AFC East. They're halfway towards the playoffs as they win this one.
Yeah, and I had them at 10 wins at the start of the season, and they're almost there already. It's not even Halloween. Yeah, you're right. I mean, they're cruising. They're doing kind of what I thought they do. A really good season for Drake May so far. Not overly spectacular, just consistent. He's got, and I said this a couple of months ago too, no standout superstars. Diggs is past being a superstar at this stage. People like Boutte and Demario Douglas helping out Diggs, but just Drake May is your quintessential kind of franchise quarterback, and he's exactly what Vrabel needed. The O-line is gelling together, and the run game is doing pretty well. I mean, May had 3 touchdowns in New Orleans. He looked pretty comfortable there. And they're 3-0 on the road too. So I mean, like you said, the Bills are definitely quaking in the boots after the weekend's performance. And they're getting Christian Gonzalez back. Everything looks good on both sides of the ball. The Pats D has only allowed 3 points in the second half all season, so they're really rolling and they're doing exactly what they need to do. And no one's going to love going into Nashville more than Vrabel this weekend, going back into Music City. And even though Rand Carthon won't be anywhere near the place, he'll be looking for the ghost of Rand Carthon. He'll be looking to exercise them, and he's going to make a real statement, and go in there and show. I'm sure there's probably not many Titans brass that's there since his time, but he's definitely going to want to put a stamp on this game and put a real beat down on the Patriots. The Titans, I feel so bad for Cam Ward. It's just week after week of relentless hammerings. The kid doesn't deserve it. I said at the start I was nervous about this wide receiver room. I think Ridley's out for this game.
I gotta say as well, Kieran, while you bring it up, if you weren't happy with Brian Callahan, why not get rid of him in the offseason? Why let the guy, like, we see teams make this mistake all the time. We saw the Bears do it. Why let your head coach then be involved in bringing a new quarterback into the building? You're going to change systems now. You're going to change coaches. You're going to put the guy's head in even more of a blender than it's already in. It doesn't seem like there's any plan in Tennessee.
No, it doesn't. And at this stage, they're not looking at this year, and probably not even looking too much at 2026. They're looking at the cap space they have. They're looking at a franchise quarterback for the next probably 10 to 15 years in Cam Ward. And they're just going to be trying to offshed. They're going to look at the rest of the season and look who they can shed off the roster and who they can bring in. The Titans will be good in a couple of years, but it's not going to be anytime soon. But it's, like I said, it's a shame to see somebody like Ward, who dominated the college game last year, and just be surrounded by less than competent, I would say, less than competent players in the NFL. They really put him in a tough spot. And, the general manager and the Titans, they did Callahan no favors either. They didn't give him any kind of a roster to work with, really. But I'm more concerned in the present time for Ward and what he's got to deal with, because he's getting sacked 6-7 times a game. He's throwing picks because he's nobody to throw to. He's throwing picks because he's getting rushed in the pocket. And saying that, the Pats are just going to tee up on him. There's going to be plenty of blitzes. They're going to make him feel uncomfortable. And it's going to get ugly. It's probably going to be a double. I know the line is set. I think it's 7.5 at this stage. It's probably going to be 9, maybe close to 10, maybe once Sunday comes around, because I just don't see any way that Drake May is going to take the foot off the gas against this team. And I would love to see Ward put up another win like he had a week ago, but I just don't see it. And it's going to be a fairly comfortable Pats victory.
Before I get to you, Brian, let me just bring in a couple of the comments that we're getting in. Kieran O'Donovan, our own Kieran O'Donovan, who's on his way to London this weekend, saying, "Evening, gents. How are you, Kieran? Thanks for tuning in. Even when you're on your night off, still staying involved. Love to see it." Leisha DeVroon saying, "Evening, all evening to you, Leisha. See, the Rams are arriving on Saturday morning for the game. Seems risky," which probably underlines, Brian, your take that it might be a Jags upset on Sunday. But Titans-Patriots doesn't look like it's going to be an upset unless you're going to tell me different.
No, unfortunately not. No, I can't give a glimmer of light for the Titans, unfortunately. Vrabel is one of those head coaches that he exploits the frailties in teams, and Kieran's alluded to the frailty. The biggest frailty of this team is the offensive line. We're seeing Cam Moore getting hammered, and I imagine he's going to have a really difficult day on Sunday. I think they're averaging 13.8 points a game. They're not even hitting the 14-point marker at the moment, Connor, against a team who's averaging 25.6 points. You've got Drake May, who's the fourth. I think he's fourth in terms of passing offense for the season. His consistency is there. It strikes me as that 30-14 type of game, a reasonably comfortable day for the Patriots. Unless we see some kind of jump. Sometimes in the NFL and in all sports, we've seen it, Connor, where a head coach is relieved of his duties and there's a bit of a bounce in the locker room, and maybe we see that, but it doesn't strike me as it was as bad as what we saw, for example, when Josh McDaniels, when he was relieved of his duties in Vegas and we saw the huge upward turn over the course of a few weeks. It doesn't strike me it was that bad, but we might see a bounce. But whether the bounce can last for 4 quarters against the former head coach who will be only happy to exploit him even more, it's Patriots for me all day long.
Yeah, I'm not going to go against the grain here. It's Patriots for me as well. Raiders Chiefs in Arrowhead. Our man Shane will be in attendance there. I'm really looking forward to that one. Shane on his way to Kansas City even as we speak. And the Chiefs are 12.5-point favorites at home. It's the biggest spread of the weekend. For me, justifiably so. The Raiders, I'm sorry to say, they're just a bad team. It's not that they're lacking in talent, and obviously Pete Carroll, I would expect, will have his influence over the course of a season, but they're just a bad team right now. I watched them up close against the Bears a couple of weeks ago. It's a game they should have won, where Max Crosby was all up in Caleb Williams' face. They were getting home. He was, one of the best games I've seen Max Crosby play. Ultimately, completely wasted because the Raiders are just and the difference between average teams and bad teams in the NFL isn't much, but it's inability to take advantage of opportunities and inability to seal the deal when you're in a position to win. That's why the way that Raiders are where they are. That and quite poor quarterback play so far this year from Geno Smith, who is the interception leader in the league for a reason. As I say, they're not lacking in talent, and give the ball to Ashton Jeanty works only so far. It's not going to work against the Chiefs, I don't think, who managed to shut down what I thought was the most potent running offense in the league last week in the Detroit Lions. Did not expect the Chiefs to be as good in that game as they were. They're rounding into form just at the right time. I think the Raiders are walking into an absolute buzzsaw here. I think the Chiefs will cover, and they'll cover it comfortably. Kieran.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of shock that you heard around the world was the Chiefs putting on that performance last week. I mean, that was just vintage stuff. I mean, it's the stuff we've been kind of waiting to see, and wondering if we would see again. But that was vintage Mahomes. I mean, we've seen the bump he's had getting back Xavier Worthy. Now they're going to get Rashee Rice. They've stopped turning the ball over. They're playing much cleaner football. Kelsey's getting into the game a lot more, and it's looking more and more like the Chiefs of the last 7 years. I mean, they're scoring on 51.8% of the drives ever since Worthy got back. It's everything's clicking now. The only kind of question mark would be, I think we saw a little bit of it last week, was the Chris Jones kind of mailing it in stuff. But I think the power of the locker room is going to get everyone together, and I don't think we're going to see that anymore, because that was that was unprofessional stuff. But I think that's the only kind of question mark you would have with this Chiefs team right now. How much is he taking that personally, or how much is he letting that affect him? But I think generally they're just going to round up and get on with it. But yeah, I mean, we talked about the Jags maybe peaking too soon. The Chiefs are just laying in the weeds and just putting in average performances, just getting by with a 500 record. Not too dissimilar to how we saw the Patriots do the last in the 2000s and the 2010s, whatever decade that's called. But I mean, 4 straight games now, 30 plus yards. They're putting up big points. Mahomes looks like the quarterback, even the fantasy quarterback that everybody has expected him to be. And like you said, the Raiders they're just not on that level. It's funny when you see the Raiders play a game, and especially when they're on defense, the only thing the camera is looking at is Max Crosby. That's the only thing they're focusing on. And that is, when you think about it, other than a star first round pick in Genty, I mean, you think of the Raiders right now, you're not thinking of Trey Tucker or Geno Smith with all his 10 interceptions so far. Max Crosby is the face of the team. There's only so much he can do. He'll get a couple of sacks, but there's only so much a DN can do against this Chiefs team. And it was frightening watching what they did to the Lions. I mean, I thought after the opening touchdown that was brought back, I thought that was just going to be the Lions getting back into the groove. But yeah, it's just it's eerily similar to the last 7 years with the Chiefs. Definitely, I mean, the line is, I mean, it speaks for itself. It's going to be a beatdown in KC, and Shane's going to probably be looking for things to do in the third and fourth quarter to keep himself entertained, because I don't think there'll be much action on the pitch or on the field. But yeah, it's got to be a pretty big Chiefs victory. It'll probably be, I mean, no one would be surprised if it's 2.5 touchdowns by the time it's all done.
Yeah, enjoy the halftime show, Shane, because the game could be over by then. Brian.
Kieran O'Donovan was nervous on Monday that the Chiefs might be repeating the trick and going back to the Super Bowl. Nothing to be nervous about, Kieran, if you're out there. It's a Chiefs Lions Super Bowl for me. That was my selection. Chiefs on Sunday, all day long. Absolute. This could be a rocking chair scenario, unless it's one of those weird divisional games that the Raiders managed to hang in close. Doesn't seem that way, Conor, right now. It just looks all things pointing towards a really strong Chiefs victory and performance.
Well, from the rocking chair to the hot seat, two coaches which are either sitting on it in Mike McDaniel's case, or maybe not too far off it in Kevin Stefanski's case, meeting up in Cleveland at the weekend. Browns favoured by 2.5 points. Something has to give here. You got two defenses who can't help giving up points. The Dolphins, on the other hand, at least are able to score points. They're scoring an average of 24 plus per game, which in another situation might actually be really good. Leaning very heavily on Devon Achane. Very interesting. I think that's the strength on strength battle we'll all be watching in this one, to the extent that we're watching it, where he goes up against arguably the best rushing defense in the league, but not necessarily one of the better passing defenses. They have tended to be taken apart by more able quarterbacks. Do you put Tua in that category or not right now? We shall see. Dylan Gabriel threw the ball 52 times for the Browns last weekend, who just cannot move the ball, average of 4 yards per attempt. There are teams that run the ball better than the Browns can throw it. That's about the worst comment you can make on an offense in today's NFL. Browns are favoured by 2.5 points at home. I got the Dolphins overcoming that and winning against the spread. I think they're due. I think they've been unlucky the past couple of weeks. I think their offense is by far and away the better of the two on show, and I think that will tell ultimately for them. Kieran.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. When you stack the two teams up against each other, even though they're going to Cleveland, and Cleveland is a 2.5 point favorite, you got Achane and Jalen Waddle. Tua is always capable of throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns. Quinshon Judkins is about all the Browns have, other than a really stellar defense, but the defense can only hold for so long. And I can't see any other thing than a Dolphins win.
Yeah, you might be looking at a prop bet for a Quinshon Judkins there. Dolphins gave up 124 yards last week to Kamani Vidal, the Chargers' backup running back. So we shall see how rookie Quinshon gets on there. Brian?
We're getting to that stage of the season where we're finding quick pick games. This is the first of probably many over the course of the next few weeks. I'll side Dolphins, but I'm not as confident as you are. You touched on today, Conor, that Myles Garrett hasn't had a sack for quite some time. I could see that happen on Sunday. What do I trust more? I'll lean Dolphins, not comfortable about it.
Yeah, too do I trust less as well. I see your manner of thinking there. Panthers Jets is another one we'll get through fairly quickly. Panthers could make it 3 wins in a row, and they'll be licking their lips at the idea of playing the Jets. They're only favoured by 1.5 points, though. I guess you got to give credit to what that Jets defense is able to do. Their offense obviously had one of the worst outings you're ever likely to see. First team to post negative passing yards in almost 30 years, following the Rams in 1998. It's Panthers in this one on the road for me. Brian?
Jets get their first fixture of the season. We see a stellar performance defensively, like what we saw from them last Sunday. But this time around, they find enough to get over the line. I just can't see the Panthers getting the 4 wins. But I do over the course of the season. But I don't think it'll be this weekend. I'm going. Is it an upset? 1.5 point spread with Quimby shows what the bookmakers think it is. From I'll go Jets to finally get over the line with a victory.
Kieran?
Can't do it. No, it's going to be Panthers win. I mean, you saw what Rico Dowdle did last week. I mean, what was it? 239, I think, all-purpose yards he had. Bryce Young has been decent. Like I said, 3-3. Jets can't get out of their own way. They are a disaster. There's been so many calls for Fields to be benched, but I mean, it's not exactly like Taylor's that much of an upgrade. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be. It comes down to skill players. Bryce Young is doing good. Rico Dowdle's the X factor, and you got Leggett and a couple of other dudes out there that can put enough points up to beat the Jets, and that's going to be a hard sell. I mean, the Jets have had the Cowboys come to town. They've had a couple of high-profile home games. Sell in this game, Jets, Panthers. If you're making that drive like me and Brian did last week, fighting that traffic, good luck.
All right, I respect the man who sticks to his principles and is consistent. Kieran wouldn't back the Jets if they were playing the Washington Generals, and you can set your watch by that. We'll take a quick timeout.
Great odds, you're in control, you always bet responsibly, and you're not afraid to choose alternatives. That's why you bet with QuinnBet. Build your own unique football bets with Create a Bet. Winning team, first goal scorer, number of goals, the possibilities are endless. And with a 4-star Trustpilot customer service rating, why not give QuinnBet a shot? QuinnBet, we bet you love it.
Eagles taking on the Vikings in the final game of the 6 o'clock window, Brian. And Vikings coming off a bye, off a morale-boosting win in London. They managed to split their international road trip where they played in Dublin and then in London in consecutive weeks. Eagles arriving looking to stop the slide. Who comes out of this one?
I think the Vikings will have had a hard 2 weeks to look at themselves in terms of the performances. Connor, with all due respect, they kind of got out of Tottenham. They were very fortunate in the end to get a victory. They played very poorly. The Browns weren't much better, and it took a late drive and a Carson Wentz touchdown to Allison to kind of put themselves in a situation they come home and say, reflect on. Like, if you think back, I don't want to get too hung up on the international stage, but when you think back to when the schedule came out, we were all lapping up that the Vikings had a mass stroke here. They were avoiding playing in Pittsburgh, they were avoiding playing in Cleveland, and yet the two performances in Dublin and then in London over the course of the two games was very poor, and they haven't really played at a level this season, with the exception maybe that Bengals home game, where then you could argue was a Browning or more so than the Vikings defense that was so impressive on that night. I'm struggling with this game because JJ McCarthy's going to come back and play by according to all the reports, and I'm not entirely sure that is the right thing to do. I think, in fact, to be more geared towards playing Carson Wentz, because I think Carson Wentz would have that factor of trying to put one over his former team, because I don't think there's much love lost between him and the former Philadelphia Eagles quarterback in terms of the nature of how his career ended there. For a team that have gone away off a mini boy, shall we call it, and will be really disgruntled and disappointed by the manner of their performance. Like, the Giants have been lauding up over the course of the last week, and rightly so, because it's been some time since the Giants played in the manner in which they did last week, never mind the fact that they went and beat their biggest rivals, but that would have hurt them and they would have been stinking over the course of the last week. I think it's time for the Eagles to get back on track and prove to everyone that they are a team that everyone should be fearing in terms of going towards the Super Bowl. Like, people have suggested as well, like, they were winning games and they hadn't been playing well and something wasn't right there. But that's also a huge sign of a really successful team, that during this difficult time, they're still finding a way to win these games. I'm going to go with the surprise. They're still favourites going to this game, Connor. Just kind of says it all. Despite what's happened over the course of the last 2 weeks with them losing to the Broncos, losing to the Giants, I will go with the victory on the road for the Eagles.
All right, Kieran, how say you?
Well, it's very strange that we're talking about the Eagles with all these issues, and they were not at the races at all against the Giants at any stage. There was no, Brian and I, our stress levels were down a lot by the second quarter when it was looking pretty good, and it was a really poor performance all around. It didn't look like half the team were that interested. But for the Vikings, it's probably a good time to get them. But then on the flip side, it may not be, because you've got a team like Brian said, the mini bye. They'll have 10 days off or 9 days off, and they're coming into this game on the road, eager to get back in the W column. They're coming in with a banged up O-line. They've got injuries across the board, but it's still the Eagles, and it's still the potential of Barkley running for 160, 170. And despite what AJ Brown says, he's an absolute. Who is more of a killer on the slot or on the slant than AJ Brown? I mean, he's just automatic when he's making catches on the sideline. I want to say the Vikings, but I just don't think it really doesn't matter who's the quarterback, whether it's Wentz or McCarthy. I just don't think that the Vikings are in a place right now that they're able to compete with a team like the Eagles. I mean, every way you look at it, Hurts can kill you with his legs, or he can just turn it up and open the game up and throw over 150, 200 yards too. So it'll be a close game. I know the line is 1.5, but the only thing that's really keeping me from being more kind of confident in the Eagles winning this, I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes. We talked about with the players, but there's been a lot of whispers about the Patullo, position and the hire. Sirianni saying it's not an issue, it's not something we're talking about. But there's definitely rumblings about the offense and how it's been kind of pushed along so far this season. I mean, we haven't seen Saquon be the Saquon he usually is. A.J. Brown's complaining about catches, and there's all these murmurs and rumblings. Devonta Smith's trying to get the ball. So this could be one of those Patullo kind of get-right games where he just gets rid of the stress of the last couple of weeks. But that's something to watch too, the Patullo situation, because I think this is going to be bubbling along the more the Eagles struggle in the month of October into November. But saying that, I just don't think the Vikings, purely based on the performance we've seen the last couple of weeks, I don't think they're going to be able to stay with them, regardless of who the quarterback is. Jefferson is really struggling to get the ball from either quarterback. They may have some luck with Jordan Mason running the ball, but I think in the end, the Eagles are just going to have too much for him. I think it's going to be Eagles by 3 or 4.
Yeah, I struggled with this one as well. I went both directions, and I initially picked the Vikings thinking, yeah, Kevin O'Connell off a bye, I trust, but I'm not sure how much I actually trust this Vikings team. And I think if you're falling into one of two narrative camps with the Eagles at the moment, I mean, we can also come to the narrative fallacy on this one. It goes in one of two directions. You either think this is the Eagles of 2023 and they're going to fall apart and they're pulling against each other behind the scenes and there's locker room tension, as you were saying, Kieran, there's whispers of discontent. And we heard Lane Johnson, the very respected voice, O-lineman within the Eagles establishment, saying our offense has become predictable. They're not happy about it. And there seems to be a lot of chat and a lot of discontent there. But that's what competitive teams do as well, which is the other side of this potential narrative, which is the Eagles lock themselves behind closed doors. They have the players only meeting. Everybody shouts at everybody else, and they come back and they get it back on track and tear the Vikings apart. I think I'm going to change my picker. I think the Eagles are actually going to win on the road. I had convinced myself it was going to be the Vikings, but now I'm going in the other direction. We are going in the direction of the 9 p.m. window now, where the Colts take on the Chargers. Chargers 1.5-point favorites at home, really off the back of two magnificent plays by Justin Herbert last week, I would suggest, both of which he looked like he was going down for sack. One where he avoids it and just gets the ball away, which saved him a bunch of yards in a tight spot. The second where, despite having a guy draped around him and about to take him down, he manages to get the ball off to Ladd McConkey, who busts a huge play and ultimately sets up the game-winning score. Colts dropped one the previous week, got back on track last week. Danny Dimes is still averaging a QBR of over 100 each week. He's got weapons all around him. The more you look at this Colts offense, as we've talked about frequently on the show, the more you like. It's a multi-headed beast. Tyler Warren being deployed across the formation. Shane Steichen having a lot of fun with him. Michael Pittman doing Michael Pittman things. Jonathan Taylor doing Jonathan Taylor things. And that's one to watch against the Chargers, who did struggle last week against Devon Achane in a big way. And we're lucky to get over the Dolphins at the end of the day, winning in the last 5 seconds. If they don't get a grip on Jonathan Taylor, this one could be over very quickly. I don't think it is going to be over very quickly. I think it's going to be a very competitive game, but I think it's going to go the Colts way. Kieran.
Yeah, this is. I'm really looking forward to seeing this. I mean, this would be a great AFC championship game. I mean, it really would. Just offense all over the place. I mean, the Daniel Jones we see right now is unrecognizable to the last 4 or 5 years. It's incredible to see him. I mean, he's only thrown 3 picks. Yeah, Brian's laughing. 3 picks in 180 passing attempts for Vanilla Vic. It's been unbelievable, and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And we're at week 7 now, and he's still being consistent, and he's still making plays, and he's still leading this team to victories. And when you've got somebody like Jonathan Taylor, he's got the most rushing yards in the league right now, 603, 7 touchdowns. You get Tyler Warren, who's coming into his own and showing the potential that he showed in college. I mean, the Colts are a great team, and nobody saw this coming. And the AFC South, which has long been dormant, is actually now, shaping up if the Texans, and we'll get to them in a little while. But that's bubbling up to be a nice little division that nobody saw happening. But I mean, the Colts are just loaded, and they're putting up crazy points all the time, and a defense that's holding up too. And the Chargers, after a solid start, they're starting to show some cracks. Started against the Giants. Joe Alt got injured. I think he's going to be back for this weekend, as well as Quentin Johnson. And Herbert is, it's going to be a nice kind of nice to be back in LA. And the Colts will be looking to get rid of the stink from the Rams defeat that they had. But the Russian defense has been holding up despite giving up 100+ yards to Krosky Merritt and Devon Achane. But opponents have averaged 144 points of rush yards per game and only 5.2 yards per carry. The Chargers team, like I've said before, is a different beast to what we've seen, and I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is going to be a shootout. I think this is just going to be a 35-32 kind of game. Two quarterbacks who are really playing at top level, skill players around the field. The only question would be a running back for the Chargers. Who's it going to be? And the other thing is the struggling to generate pressure. Now,
Kamani Vidal went for over 100 yards last week. I mean, it wasn't much of a downshift in service from Marion Hampton, in fairness to him.
Sure, they would rather Hampton out there, but that was a nice performance from him. But we know what Jones is like when he's got pressure. And without Khalil Mack for the Chargers, they're really struggling to get to the quarterback. The Russian defense is okay, but I worry about that kind of secondary as well. So I expect a lot of points. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think I pulled for the Colts for this one by 3, but I think it's going to be a 35-32, 34-31 kind of game going down to the wire.
Yeah, and as you say, we won't be surprised if we see these two teams matched up in the playoffs. They've given us a couple of playoff classics in the past. Brian?
In a quickie stat, the Colts would have lost 2 games this season by the end of this weekend, and both games will have taken place in SoFi. I go with the Chargers. Having lost to the Rams, they also lose to the Chargers this weekend. Similar kind of game to what was actually played a few weeks ago. Ding-dong game, back and forth, lost late. I see the similarities. I think the Chargers find a way to come out the right side of it.
We move to Yizzer Giants next, who are on the road and taking the trip to the Mile High City to take on the Denver Broncos, fresh off a burn the tape game. Those of us watching it feel like we'll never get those 3.5 hours of our life back. Broncos Jets in London last week. I'm just so glad that wasn't the game in Dublin. There never would have been another NFL game in Dublin if that had been the first one ever. Anyway, the less said about that, the better. The Broncos arrive into this one as 7.5 point favorites, which, based on how both teams have composed their body of work so far this season, you would say maybe is fair. I would suggest it flatters the Broncos, certainly in comparison, or certainly on the back of what they were able to manage last week offensively, where matched up against, admittedly, one of the stronger defensive units in the NFL. They didn't look great, but they'll need a lot better than that against the Giants, who, as we know, are feisty, capable of great feats, also capable of dropping duds as well, as we saw in New Orleans the other week. But off the back of a hugely morale-boosting victory against the Eagles, this and Cam Scatterbo combination, I don't think that's going to be enough to get them over the line in Denver. But I am, cautiously on the watch out for whether the Broncos can actually resuscitate the sort of offense that we saw last season, which has sputtered a little bit this season, and which will need to get right if they're going to emerge victorious from this, which I think they will. But I don't imagine they're going to cover the spread from what I'm looking at. Brian?
I'd love to see it, Connor. I'd love to see the Giants find a way to go into Denver and win. I think it would be, again, exhilarating for the NFC East to have teams so tight together, which, bear in mind, the Commanders are going to play the Cowboys at the same time. But unfortunately, I just can't see it. I think we're in a similar kind of pale to what we saw from the Jags last week, where they came off that huge primetime victory. They had 3 or 4 days of continuous scrutiny and talk and all positive stuff, and then they laid an egg. I don't think it's going to be a lay an egg performance, because I just think they're up against a team defensively coming off. It was a difficult performance for them in London last weekend. Their defense still played at a stellar rate. 9 sacks on Justin Fields, highest sack percentage in the league, highest sack percentage on third down. The Giants' offensive line is playing really well, and Kieran alluded to last week when we were there how different and how cohesive they are this season. But I just think this is too staring a test. I think the Giants will play admirably, but I think ultimately we're not at that level yet. I'd like to think that we can go in there and put a performance in that most fans would acknowledge after the game. Was they've lost, they put in there's positive signs to come, but I just think it's too big of an ask. It's Denver for me, and I do think the Broncos will cover the 7.5.
Kieran, go on, show us some optimism. Call the Giants winning in Mile High.
Oh, 100%. Oh, Giants are winning in Denver. Believe it. And I know that they would have loved to have played a game a little earlier than, they've been off for a week now, but you have to take that energy. I mean, we were in the locker room, we were in the press conference afterwards. This is a different team. Over the last 3 weeks, they've converted 7 to 12 in the red zone. That was not anywhere close to the first couple of weeks we saw. The defense was flexing the muscle, and Denver can't score. I mean, if you can't score points on the Jets, I mean, I know they're going to be at home, but the Denver offense is not all that stellar. We've seen Nix. He hasn't put up a lot of big points, bar the Bengals game. Cortland Sutton and Mims are asking for the ball to be thrown up, and he hasn't got it up there yet. I like the Giants in this game. I really do. I think everything's going to come together. I think it's going to be scrappy. There's going to be a hell of a lot of Scalabo, and they're going to be able to stop him so much. But I think Dart took massive leaps in that game on prime time. And I'm very optimistic on the Giants right now. I'll probably be regretting it, but I'm all on Big Blue in Denver. I don't rate this. I know the defense is phenomenal, but their ability to put up 15, 16, 17 points. I'm a little skeptical right now. So I can see the Giants scoring at least 3 touchdowns in Denver, and I am taking Big Blue by 6.
All right, it's great to have you back, big guy. I love the optimism. It's always the hope that kills you, but let's get all aboard the Dart for one more week at least. Commanders traveling to Arlington to take on the Cowboys. Both teams trying to shake off poor performances last week. Commanders beaten with a walk-off field goal on Monday night. The Cowboys suffering the nightmare of the old boy as Rico Dowdle ran rings around them, and the Panthers came out with a victory in the last week. Brian, how do you see this one?
You're talking about the Dart. It's probably more like the Beller, as we used to call it, Conor, which was the one that went straight to Belfast and you couldn't stop it, because this feels like a offensive juggernaut performance from both sides, and nobody's going to be able to stop either team defensively, because what we saw from the Commanders defense, I know it's a week-to-week league and they'll probably try to right the wrongs of it very quickly over the course of a few days since Monday Night Football. The tackling on Monday, you called it out, during our discussions during the week, their tackling at times on Monday night was not at the level in which we saw last year. And even going into the season, Kieran was alluding to this defense playing at a good rate last year, but ultimately they fell short because they just didn't have the players. I still don't think they have the players against the Cowboys team that, the frustration for Cowboys fans right now, their quarterback is probably playing, I wouldn't say at an MVP level, but he's certainly up there. They're putting up huge numbers week to week. They're averaging 37 points a game, and yet they're coming out on the wrong side of these games. And this strikes me as that type of game. On Sunday, huge NFC East clash in which both teams put up huge points, and which defense is going to crack the most. And I think again, it will be the Cowboys defense that cracks the most. And Jerry Jones will be seeding again, because I see the Commanders winning this. If the results were to go the way in which Kieran has called, with the Giants' victory, the Commanders win this, and even if the Vikings would take care, that would bring everything so close in this division. So it could be an exciting weekend again, but I think it's the Commanders in this one.
Yeah, this is an exciting looking game, Karen. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's a divisional clash. You're never quite sure what way either of these teams are going to go. I'm sure there's probably going to be a lot of points, and the defense has given up a lot of scores, which is going to make for an entertaining game, but who's going to come out the right side of it?
Yeah, just bizarre stats across the board. I mean, the Cowboys are the worst passing D in the league. However, they're averaging 799 combined yards per game. Commanders are averaging 702 combined yards per game. It's just, we're going to get a lot of points in this game. Defense is at an absolute premium. I actually like the Cowboys in this. I think they've been phenomenal on offense. I mean, Dak has just he's making do with what he has, which has been, what's his name? Turpin and George Pickens. And now I think CD Lamb is probably going to be back for this Sunday, if not next week. But he's been great on offense. They've managed to run the ball. And we've seen the Commanders, these close games that they've been losing are the ones they were winning last year. And I'm not scared of the Commanders. The Giants should have beaten them. This is just not a team that strikes fear in anybody. Their defense is still very, very suspect. They're going to be missing Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown. I know Krosky Merritt's a beast on the ground, but he's probably going to put up at least 1 to 2 touchdowns, I think, in this game, because the Cowboys can't. They have the worst passing D and probably the worst rushing D as well. Everywhere you look, the defense is suspect, and everywhere you look, the offense is looking very healthy. So it's going to be a real back and forth ding dong in AT&T. Just the kind of game Jerry loves. He'll be in the box. He'll be hopefully not flipping anybody off, but he's going to be enjoying watching this performance. And Dak has thrown at least three passing touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. I mean, what more do you want from a quarterback right now? They're not. If you're not going to be good, be entertaining, and that's really the stat that we're looking at with the Cowboys right now. They're not going to compete for the playoffs, but just be entertaining and put on a good performance. I think we're going to have one in this game. I just think there's too many positives in the offense, despite McLaurin being out, and Lamb I see is just back. So yeah, I'm actually going to go with the Cowboys. I think putting them up against this Commanders team last year would have said something different, but I just think that, and we discussed it in the summer, that aura of the Commanders with those close games, they're not winning them anymore, and we kind of alluded to that and thought they would kind of revert back to the mean, and that's kind of what's happening right now at 3-3. And I like the Cowboys in just an absolute, as we say, a slobber knocker, just back and forth. 41-38 kind of game that has everybody raving about. Ridiculous catches by CeeDee Lamb.
I see that. I hear that. I trust Dak. I don't trust this Cowboys defense in any way, shape, or form. I'm not entirely sure which Commanders team is going to show up, but I do think that they will emerge on the right side of this one. I think they've got more to lose than the Cowboys have. I see them as a dangerous opponent at this point, and I think that they will come out of Arlington with the win. We'll take a quick break.
Build your own unique football bets with Create a Bet. Winning team, first goal scorer, number of goals, the possibilities are endless. QuinnBet, we bet you love it.
Packers Cardinals is next up. The Packers have wobbled a little bit in recent weeks, but had the ultimate get-right game as the one on the schedule that everybody seems to love at the moment. Unfortunately, the Bengals, who are playing the Pittsburgh Steelers a little bit later on tonight. Cardinals gave up a lot of rushing yards to Jonathan Taylor last week, and that to me is the first thing they're going to have to get right with Josh Jacobs and the Packers. Josh Jacobs coming off a great game against the Bengals. Cardinals giving up almost 6 yards per carry. Cardinals have hung in every single game they've played this year. They're 2-4, but every single game they played has been decided by 4 points or fewer. They've been in every single one of them. I don't like the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. was concussed last time out. I'm not sure that he's going to go or he's going to be at 100% for Sunday. I do like the fact that potentially Jacoby Brissett gets the second start. He put up over 320 yards against the Colts last weekend. The Packers, I was very high on at the start of the season, even before the Parsons trade. I had them picked to win the NFC North, and yeah, they're still potentially well placed to do so. Was not expecting the big letdown against the Browns, the tie against the Cowboys. They have looked at times like the most efficient offense in the league, and they're pushing the ball down the field with reckless abandon at times. They have such a varied wide receiver room and so many different points of attack. As I say, Josh Jacobs has been going really well as well. I don't think they've quite got the full value out of Parsons in that D yet, and maybe it's still a little bit early to be passing final judgment on that one, and they will get that right. And I trust that Jeff Hafley and that Packers unit will figure out the best way to optimize what they have. But it's just not quite firing on all cylinders. Are they going to need all cylinders in Arizona? No, I do think they're going to win this one, but I'm watching the Packers quite closely because it's really it's championship game or bust for this team. So they need to start getting it more in gear sooner rather than later. This is a good way to start if they get over this one. Kieran.
Yeah, nice little trip to the desert. It's getting a little chilly up in Wisconsin this time of year, so I'm sure the fans will enjoy going there. Love is, like you said, he's completing 70% of his passes, 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions so far. He was nice and efficient last week. When he's kept clean, he leads the league in completion rate at 86. And the Cardinals don't rush anybody. I think they're one of the lowest in pressure rate in the league, and they don't blitz either. So, I mean, it's a perfect situation for the Packers to go into. It's perfect for Love to go out there and spread the ball out to his wide receivers. I don't rate the Cardinals. I think 2-4 is kind of flattering to them. I'm not going to keep repeating myself about my opinion on Kyler Murray. Brissett had a really good game, like you said, kept them in the game. He's no slouch. He put up 2 touchdowns and over 300 yards. So I wouldn't be too worried about the Cardinals going out there with Brissett, but I don't rate him as a team. I think, I don't see them as being any kind of force in the South or in the West. I mean, but it looks like just a straightforward game for the Packers to come into and for Love just to put up some nice stats, get the running game going and use it as a kind of prep game for the rest of the season. And especially, when they come up against more difficult opponents. The Cardinals do have some nice skill players, but we haven't seen the Marvin Harrison we saw last year. You talked about a concussion. there's something's not going on, or something not right is going on there. They do have Trey McBride. He's not obviously had the same impact as he had last year, but they do have some nice players on offense. They will be without James Conner and Trey Benson, so those are two big scratches against them. Line is 7. I don't think the Packers are going to have much difficulty in taking care of the Cardinals. I mean, Tucker, somebody like Tucker Kraft coming in now, he's emerging too, so that's just another weapon for Love to throw to. You're right in saying that they've kind of been vanilla so far. They haven't been spectacular, but again, just like the Chiefs, you just need to tread water, really. The big guys just need to tread water this time of year. Just stack up wins as you go along, and just keep the cards close to your chest, and wait till Thanksgiving, and after that to start really cranking the gear up. So I don't see any real opposition for the Packers. It should be an easy win, probably by 10 or 14 when it's all said and done.
Brian, call this one for us before we move on to Falcons Niners.
Kieran said the Packers need to keep the cards close to their chest. Well, they are. They're going to play them on Sunday. What more do you want? Packers for me, Jacoby Brissett looks like he's going to play again. According to the reports in the last hour, it's trending towards him starting again. I think over the course of the next few weeks, if he continues to play, we're going to see the team gradually dip off, because he tends to play well, then he tails off, and that's ultimately what's going to happen on Sunday. They'll play well for a while, they'll tail off. The Packers get it done in the second half.
A team we saw play particularly well last weekend were the Atlanta Falcons, Brian, who are Bijan powered, and what a thing of beauty that is to watch when it goes right. Will it go right in Santa Clara against the Niners?
Oh God, this is a really difficult game. This is arguably one of the most difficult games of the weekend to pick, and it's when I looked at the schedule, you see, is this an enticing Sunday night football game? I think it's starting to look more enticing as the week has gone on, because as you say, you look at a Falcons team that over the last 3 or 4 years, they don't win Monday Night Football. They don't beat a Buffalo Bills team. I know and it's not even it's not even the fact they beat the Bills. It's the manner in which they beat the Bills. Like, that's defense. And we spoke about it over the course of the last 6 weeks around, we're seeing them play in kind of patches, and they're sporadic, and then they lay eggs. But when they put it all together, they're arguably one of the best teams in the NFC. They're certainly challenging for that division, and people are all waxing lyrical right now about the Bucs, but the Falcons are only a game back on them. But this, again, is that kind of measuring stick type of game. And I don't think they're going to come out the right side of it, because it looks like, if you read the speculation, I think Purdy's going to play this week. Kittle could be back. Like, this is what the 49ers fans, this is what we joked about, Connor, isn't it? The 49ers you're talking about treading water. They just need to keep finding a way to get these victories, get the big guns back, and then they move on. And I think if they do get them back on Sunday, we're going to see a 49ers team who will come off a really difficult loss in Tampa last weekend, looking to rebound. And I think they rebound and get on the right side of it. I'm going to go with the 49ers to win this game. So I think it'll be a tight affair. Falcons play well. Penix plays well. They put up a good account of themselves, but ultimately going into Santa Clara is a really difficult ask. I have the 49ers coming out the right side of it.
Yeah, I find this one very difficult to pick. I kind of feel like you do about the Falcons, and sorry, this is probably an analogy that will go over the heads of anyone under the age of 40, but they kind of remind me of the analog TV era with the rabbit ears. Remember, you used to have to fiddle with the rabbit ears to get the reception to come in. Somebody be standing behind the television, a little bit left, there, no, there, hold it there. It's only when the rabbit ears are perfectly positioned and you see what the Falcons can do that you start to believe. We did see that against the Bills, both offensively and defensively. When the Falcons pass rush shows up, the Falcons win games, as they did against the Vikings earlier this season, with the 2 rookies particularly in effect. They haven't really performed at that level every single week. Reasons to believe, obviously, since they did what they did on Monday night. And I'm optimistic about them going into Santa Clara, because they're probably just about catching the last of the Niners hanging in the clinches, gutting out games and managing to grind out wins somehow with nobody fit. Like, at one stage it was looking like, will the last fit player in Santa Clara please switch off the lights? But Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh and the Niners leaders and the guys who filled in have made it competitive, much more so than it should have been. And once they get the cavalry back, I fully expect the Niners to make a charge going down the stretch. I think that probably happens from maybe next week onwards. Sorry, Rory's just made me laugh in the comments there, saying if you want to confuse an under 40-year-old, talk about the coal shed out the back. Yeah, that's some next level boomer stuff. But in next week's episode, we might get that and talk about putting slack on the fire. Yeah, and the coal.
Yeah, brilliant.
Gone down a rabbit hole now.
Jeez, even I remember that.
Well, the 49ers better not be slack, shall we say?
Hey, finish that point anyway. I think the Niners get rolling from next week. I think the Falcons might just squeak this one out on the road. Kieran, your pick before we move on.
I'm still not convinced about the Jets, despite the performance they put up this week against the Bills. I mean, they do have a great offense. Bijan Robinson is an absolute stud. Still question marks for me about Penix. I know we did a nice game, but that was one game. I need to see a more consistent level. And they're going into San Francisco. I think there's just the Niners are just going to have too much for them. I talk about the muscle memory. It's the location. It's the whole mystique of the Niners. The Falcons don't have that mystique just yet. Push comes to shove, I'm taking the Niners.
All right, we had two really good Monday Night Football games this week. We've got two really good ones coming up on Monday of next week as well. The Bucks take on the Lions in the first of those. Lions favoured by 5.5 points at home. Kieran, coming off a tough loss against the Chiefs, where maybe some of the flaws that we hadn't necessarily seen since week one against the Packers were exposed by a Chiefs team that was absolutely rolling. They face a Bucks team that has injury problems of its own. We just finished talking about the Niners. The Bucks have coped manfully with their own injuries, and they're getting some guys back and losing other guys. So far, it's been so good for Tampa Bay. Can it continue, though, in Detroit against a wounded animal in the Lions, who are very dangerous when they're coming off a loss like that?
Ooh, another one which would be a great NFC Championship game. I love Baker. I love what he's done. I love what he did last week. I love the whole story about him, from being a cast out to being one of the top quarterbacks in the league right now. And you know, they're really damaged on offense. I think they've got Godwin and Evans still out, and Ibuka's got a hamstring injury. He might be a game time decision. It's really hard to call. This is such a really hard game to call. I mean, it's in Detroit. We know what that home crowd is like. The Lions are averaging 52.7 combined points per game. I mean, again, we talked about gunslinging games. They're right up there with them. They're just loaded on offense. I know Amon-Ra St. Brown had a quiet game, and the Chiefs shut him down, and they're coming up against another good defense with Levante David and Yaya Diaby. God, there's so many angles for this game. I had the Lions, and I was high on the Lions in this game purely because they're at home. The more you think about it, there's so many different factors here in this game. They came up against a roadblock with the Chiefs. The running game stalled. They're not bringing Montgomery in as much as they should. I don't think they got to balance out that running game. So that's probably something that'll get the management thinking about putting Montgomery out there a little bit more. But they're banged up on secondary. We saw what happened with Branch. I think they're missing Terry and Arnold. I mean, that's the thing now. You got a defense is banged up and an offense is banged up, so something's got to give. I think Terry and Arnold's out as well. DJ Reed is banged up, so there's going to be they're going to need a lot of Hutchinson, the Lions this weekend. But with the front seven of the Bucks, I mean, Gibbs and Montgomery going up against that front four of Diaby and Vita Vea, it's just going to be a phenomenal kind of matchup, and just quality players and Pro Bowlers everywhere. I can see Baker making a lot of moves with his feet. I mean, he scrambled a lot last week. I can see Hutchinson running after him a lot. Just think about the two rosters right now. It's just, I think we'll see this game again in January, and I think that would be a phenomenal game to see. Offense everywhere. Oh God, push comes to shove, I'm going to take the Lions probably by 1 or 2 points, because it's purely because they're at home, and I think the Bucks, he's just going to be missing too many weapons. I know he used Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson last week, but that's not Ibuka, that's not Mike Evans, that's not Godwin. I think I'm just going to take the Lions. Yeah, I'm going to make that decision, the Lions.
All right, Brian, as we were saying earlier with Colts Chargers, another one that looks like a preview of a playoff matchup that we may see in January, but who's going to have bragging rights going into it?
Well, I believe the Lions will win inevitably. I think the spread is from 4.5 to 5.5 points for Quinn. I think the Lions will rebound and win. But I did want to speak about it. It was probably more so for our Monday conversation. We'll see how this weekend. We won't get to talk about Monday because the game is Monday night. Sorry, of course. It's a midnight kickoff, which is a nice time for the people who can manage to stay up for an extra hour or two. But the Lions were effective last season, were so effective last year, and even the year prior to that, was because they had this two-man operation in the backfield. You talk about all the gags and the Sonic and Knuckles, but early on in this season, it seems like they're not adapting to that kind of scenario anymore. It's like they're trying to make Gibbs the bell cow running back, and then they bring in Montgomery to complement him. That's not worked so far. Okay, they've won games, but it hasn't been at the level in which you saw previously. And I think the Chiefs kind of acknowledged that last week and they shut Gibbs down. They brought Montgomery in down. They shut Montgomery down. If the Bucs can repeat the trick and cut out the offensive juggernaut of a running game, I'm not saying Goff is one-dimensional, but it does put a lot of pressure on Goff then to continuously throw at the level in which he does. And yeah, they got great players, but if you can cut out half the battle, it gives you a great opportunity to win. But I don't know whether they will do that this weekend, because I get a feeling that the Lions will react. We saw last weekend early on in Thursday Night Football that the Eagles were doing what they hadn't been doing, which was to try run Saquon Barkley effectively, and it started off okay. Then it kind of got away from it again. I don't think they'll get away from it this weekend. I think they'll go back to what we saw previously, which is a balanced offense where you're using Montgomery effectively, you're using Gibbs, they'll run the life out of Bucs defense, who are carrying a lot of injuries, as you said, and I think ultimately the Lions will find a way to win this game. I do agree. I think if we could get this game in the playoffs, which we were close to getting last year, back-to-back years divisional round, I think we'd all be wetting our lips come January. But for me this weekend, the Lions rebound. Not what you want to hear, bearing in mind the Bears are challenging again within the division, but it's the Lions for me.
Yeah, we shall see. But I do think that the Bucs have been slightly, living on luck seems a slightly unfair thing to say, given that they've had so many injury woes. They've coped manfully with those. They've also got the breaks when they've needed them. They have made their own luck and they've taken advantage of it. I think that runs out in Detroit this weekend. It's Lions for me. Texans Seahawks is the second of the Monday night doubleheader. Seahawks return home after going to Duval and taking down the previously high-flying Jags. I really like the Seahawks team. We were talking about them last week and what Mike McDonald has done since he went in there. We talk about them taking Sam Darnold, and I won't say he picked up where he left off, because where he left off was with a demoralizing playoff defeat last year at the Vikings, but his regular season form has very much re-emerged in Seattle, where Jackson Smith-Njigba obviously has been the absolute standout on that Seahawks offense and arguably the form wide receiver in the league. That's the battle that I'm looking forward to most, is Jackson Smith-Njigba going up against Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie in that Texans secondary. The best defense in the National Football League right now, and certainly the best secondary. Two absolute shutdown corners. Both of them averaging a 70 QB rate when targeted. They've been so impressive this season, and that's going to be just a mouth-watering battle, seeing those Seahawks wide receivers and JSN in particular going up against that Texans secondary, complemented, of course, by what they got in the front end and the pass rush that they can bring home. The Texans giving up a miserly 12 points per game, which is compensated for the sputtering offense and the lack of fireworks that we've seen. They've got Nico Collins back, though. CJ Stroud has played an awful lot better over the past 2 games than he did in the previous 3 games. They're coming off a bye, so they roll into town confident. They roll into town feeling that they can take the Seahawks down. The Seahawks, as we spoke about at length last week, generally been much better on the road than they have been away. Mike McDonald has a sensational away record. He's 9-1 as head coach at the Seattle Seahawks, including the last 8 straight, culminating in that victory in Jacksonville last weekend. I do think they return home and make the stand here, and that the 12s take down the Texans, and it's a Seahawks victory. Kieran.
Yeah, I mean, again, another great matchup. I mean, who would have thought the Texans would be in with a chance with the AFC South after the way that they started, losing 3 straight. But since then, I mean, they've put up, like you said, they put up 70 combined points against the Titans and Rams, and they're back in the rhythm, and they're off a bye. Stroud is being kept upright, so to an extent. That O-line is still, extremely suspect, but he's been able to stand up and he's been able to get plays off and he's been able to put points on the board. Saying that, I think that the offense is still a little underwhelming. Nick Chubb, it's Nico Collins. I'm more hopeful than anything with this offense. I know the defense doesn't need to be spoken about; they're absolute monsters. And I'd love to see them go into to Seattle and put up a good performance. However, this Seattle team, like you said, is they're the team. I know they're in the Pacific Northwest and they're away from a lot of other major cities and they're in different time zones. But I mean, that team right now is quietly getting an amazing run going together. Smith-Njigba, the leading receiver in the league right now, he's got 696 yards. He's just been a standout. Kenneth Walker's averaging 61 yards per game on the ground. They're averaging 27.7 points a game. Everything's going in their favor, and they've got a defense with Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, DeMarcus Lawrence, Julian Love, Kobe Bryant. I mean, it's Pro Bowlers all over the place. On any other day, I'd give the Texans a chance. I know they're, a win for the Texans gets them right back in there. I mean, if the Jags lose and go to 4-3 and the Texans go to 3-3, that'd make things really spicy, breathing down the Colts' neck. But I think it's too much of an ask for this O-line of the Texans to keep Stroud upright. I mean, you got monsters coming at that O-line, and they're going to come at him early and often. I just think it's too much for that O-line to take. I see Stroud getting sacked a lot. I see him getting hurried and pressured a lot. I see a couple of picks, and I just see the Seattle, along with the 12th man, just imposing the will on this Texans team, who I still think, even with a loss, will still be in with a shout in the South. But I think this is going to be a test that's just going to be too big for him. This Seattle team, I mean, I really love this team. I think I would love to see them go really far in the playoffs, but I think it's going to be too much for the Texans in Seattle on Monday.
Before we get the last word on Monday night, just if you're heading out on Sunday night to watch a very interesting slate of games, check out Red Zone at the Arlington. And Bar, our partners.
I don't think Connor's checking out anything.
Lost him at the crucial time.
We did. We have. He's back. He's back.
So I cut off in my prime there. I was taken down by a Seattle pass rusher. But as I dust myself down, Brian, what I was asking you was, take us home. Tell us who's going to win this game between the Texans and the Seahawks.
I fear for the poor emerald-oiled Seahawkers. That is a fan base and a fan group that support the Irish NFL show. A 3 a.m. kickoff. That's what you need going into a Tuesday morning. Torture. I imagine some of them will hold fire and watch it when they get up on Tuesday morning or early on Tuesday morning. Seahawks for me, Connor. I'm not sold on the Texans' victory a few weeks ago against the Ravens. I think it's more down to the Ravens' difficulty coming off a bye week. It's a long trip out to the Emerald City. I think Seattle will be primed and ready, coming off a really big win last weekend against the Jags. Seattle close out week 7 with another victory.
All right, you follow the Yellow Brick Road, of course, to the Emerald City. We're hitting the road now. We'll be back with you very soon on the Irish NFL Show.